All right. So, to my viewer or maybe viewers, I'm talking with Andrew Riel. We've been friends for a long time, and he's been working in the construction, building, handiwork trades for a while now. About how long you been doing that?
So I've been in the trades for probably about 10 years now, but I've been on my own for about 6 or 7. So running my own business for 7 years or so, six or
Cool,
seven.
cool. And what's the name of your
So my
company?
business name is Riel Renovations. So because my last
Okay,
name is Real,
yeah,
so it
that's
worked out.
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good alliteration. Uh, so, well, let me see here. So, the idea is kind of talk about how faith and your work kind of intersect.
Mhm.
And for you, I believe it was your faith life that kind of started first. So, why don't you just share a little bit about how that came to be?
Yeah. So I mean, in terms of my faith life, I always grew up in the church. So ever since I was born, I grew up in the church. Always, did a good job following the rules and stuff like that. I wouldn't say I really started taking it seriously or having much of a actual personal walk, Christian walk, until probably ninth grade or so, maybe 10th grade in high school, and then for ever since then, been following the Lord as best I can. Not always perfect, but yeah, that's at least the shortest version of how I kind of became a Christian.
Awesome, awesome. So, how did you get interested in working with your hands?
Yeah, so I always kind of enjoyed it. I did a lot of like industrial arts type stuff in high school, and always kind of had like a just an interest in it. I was anytime people were working on the house or anything like that, I always wanted to watch. I found it fascinating, but I actually wasn't originally going to do it for a career. I went to school and actually graduated with a degree in psychology of all things, but that wasn't my original intent. Was to work with my hands and do this for the rest of my life. I wasn't planning on doing that, but the more I did it, the more I kind of realized that was more what made sense for me, and was my best option to kind of both bring satisfaction to myself and fulfillment to myself, but also to theoretically, help those around me too a little bit. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I would say from an early age, I always was had a proclivity to watching and doing things with my hands as much as I could. So.
And so, who was teaching you those classes while you were in school too?
Yeah, when I was in school, it was Papa Matson,
So,
who I believe you've talked to recently. So
yes.
yeah, he had a big impact on me doing that, and then my first boss too had a huge impact on me, kind of combining being a Christian, but also kind of furthering my skill set with my
Hmm.
hands and the trade and stuff like that. So
Was there any like pushback from your like parents about that? I mean, you've invested in this psychology degree, which is a worthy accomplishment.
sure.
But I mean, I don't know if there's like if you've mastered the psychological aspects of presenting bids to clients or
Well, I'll say so. I'll answer kind of both of those. I guess they're kind of a little separate, but yeah, I would say there was some pushback, at some points. I think, especially right when I first started to do my own thing, there was a little bit, not so much really just from my father, not so much from my mother, but just a little bit of like, why would you spend all that money on that and then not use it kind of thing. Um, so there was a little bit, but I would say for the most part, I was blessed with a situation where both parents and community were very supportive of it. I think they knew me pretty well. They knew what my skill set was and kind of who I was as a person. Um, and what was the other? You asked something else too. I can't remember what it was.
how your psychology degree has
Oh yes.
benefited your
Well,
business.
yeah, it's funny because I'm sure I mean, anytime you're working with homeowners or whether I mean, obviously trades are all kinds of different things, but homeowners, bosses, whatever, there's obviously is a level of understanding how people think. It is helpful. I don't think I necessarily use it every day, but there are certainly times where understanding how to speak to people is definitely helpful to say the least, because there certainly can be some opinions that come up in different projects and things like that need a little bit of patience and understanding, to say the least. So,
Mm-hmm. And how did you, like, let me see, I don't know how to word this. Before you kind of settled into what you're doing now, you were going to school, you're not totally sure
Mm.
what the plan is there. I mean, did you kind of have anxieties about that? Like, what your future would be and
Mm-hmm.
things like that?
Yeah, I would say I definitely did. I think I would honestly say probably anxiety even before starting school. And I think maybe that was even part of the reason why I felt I needed to do school was just uncertainty about career and things like that. Not sure that doing stuff with my hands was really going to be able to meet the needs that I had in my life, whatever I thought they were at the time at 18, 19 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, yeah, for sure. And I think honestly, anxiety probably drove me at some point to finish with the degree and do all that stuff. And then especially at the beginning of starting a business, I mean, I'm sure you can imagine, like I said, it took, a big community and people, especially my brother was a big influence in kind of pushing me to do it. And I think there was a lot of fear. But I think, kind of just trusting that it'll work out went a huge way. And luckily it did for the most part so far.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say at the beginning, especially thinking about, doing something like that. And especially at the time, I think even then compared to now, it was even probably I feel like it's starting to swing back around. People have a little bit more respect for the idea of having a career in the trades. I think at that time it really was still kind of, wouldn't say frowned upon, but it wasn't thought of as the most noble thing to do. So I would say, there was definitely a little bit of a few voices saying, you can't do that. You won't have any money. You won't be able to support yourself, kind of thing. So there definitely was some for sure.
Yeah. I feel like for guys, for men, it's we don't want to have our identity totally wrapped up in like our careers or whatever, but there is sort of I think that part of the way that God made us is that we need to have purpose, and not knowing exactly what you're going to do with your future and how you're going to proceed forward is pretty challenging. So like I was in a similar experience, where I'd say I put all my eggs into the basket of school, going to Bible college and thinking I'm going to work in a church, and then not necessarily finding the opportunities, or if it wasn't for the fact that I had a little bit of something to fall back on, and that's not to say I don't feel like I fell back into working with my hands, because I feel like it is something that I'm passionate about. Like even if I'm teaching, like my time of study is better done while I'm working and listening and thinking about things, rather than if I was just trying to sit in an office,
Right.
like I need to be doing things. I need to be making things. And, so finding that, it was really helpful for me. So it seems like that's probably a little bit similar to what you kind of experienced.
Yeah, I would say so. I think probably we're both similar in that way. I think if I had an office job, I'd probably last about a week. I think it's nice to be able to both do things with my hands, do different things, but that's the biggest thing. It's always changing. At least the way I
Mm-hmm.
have it set up for me. I'm always doing new things all the time, and I prefer it that way. It's challenging, and sometimes I mess things up. But I think the idea of doing new things is something that I've always I like the challenge. I like to kind of explore different stuff I haven't done before. So.
And I would say, like there's a lot of young guys that are trying to figure out what they're going to do. And they maybe, whether they get a job, just, like a retail job or something like that, or if they're going to college and they're just, you know, because somebody said like, this is the path you're supposed to take. If their work doesn't provide a lot of like creative outlet, that there's a tendency to kind of gravitate towards like escapism,
Mm-hmm.
like through video games and stuff like that. Not that video games are bad necessarily, but you can but if you're working just to support the habit like that or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
that's not really the most healthy lifestyle.
Yep.
So how do you feel like having a job where you're involved, in being creative and things like that, kind of scratches some of those
Yeah.
itches?
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying, and it's funny. I see a similar thing too. I know even like just, I mean, I don't really play a ton of video games. Like you said, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with them, right? But I think, from what I can see from the outside, there seems to be a lot of trending towards like having these, you know, video games that are set around building almost a different type of lifestyle, right? A lifestyle that probably, I don't know if this is at the front of their minds, but a lot of people would say maybe that's, the lifestyle they would want, right? Like all these different types of simulators and things like that, where you're, building different stuff, right? So, but yeah, I would say for me, yeah, that's what it does. I think even part of the reason why I stepped out on my own a lot was because I was finding the routine and the, same stuff kind of boring, and it wasn't fulfilling for me. So I even though it was somewhat still kind of different, it was a lot of the same stuff, and I just didn't like the, schedule being the same and the tasks being the same. So I would say kind of finding the ability to, like you said, kind of scratch that itch a little bit of, being creative and finding solutions for different things on my own, not having to kind of just run everything by someone else. That's part of the reason why I stepped out on my own. It helped me kind of do things and, learn things in a different way, for sure. And I would say, yeah, that was huge. I think that's part of why it's a good fit for me. So
Yeah, well, I think that's something, like, I think obviously, like, people design these games to be addictive,
mm-hmm.
and I would find, like, I know, like, me, like, I'll download a game and I'll, like, but no, I played it like way too much in like
Yeah.
2 days. I got to delete it. I can't handle it or whatever. But like, it's like, because you're wanting to like build a little city, and I think the thing is that it's just in a video game, like it's easier than real life, it's faster than real life, but it's not as fulfilling.
Yeah.
And once, it is a little bit more effort, but like once you get, the opportunity to figure out a real life problem and solve some real issue, like that's an awesome feeling. And I don't know about you get to, so when you work, you're not typically doing the same things every day.
Mm-hmm.
How do you approach, like, I guess just a situation that you haven't encountered before? Like how do you deal with something you haven't done and mastered totally yet?
Yeah. No, for sure. So, a huge way, I mean, this is going to sound, I mean, it's crazy, but I honestly, I like to do a lot of research on it, right? So, I did a lot, especially this past year specifically, took on a lot of things that were bigger and newer for me that I hadn't really done before. So, a huge thing, and I think this is important really for myself and really probably any job, anyone, young people in a, whatever position is, relying on the community, right? So I luckily have still a few people in my community that have done a lot of these things. So I can use them as a resource, which is huge. And that helps me kind of jumpstart my creative process of figuring out how I'm going to do it. But also even just, we kind of briefly mentioned the internet too, like YouTube's a huge resource, right? So the internet has saved me a few times, right? So there are a few things where you kind of, at least maybe it's not exactly what I'm doing, but it kind of starts me figuring out how that's going to go. So yeah, then in one way or another, the biggest way I approach it, is community. And then there is also just that element of trial and error, right? Some things, if it's not like an over, not the best way to word this, but if it's not the hugest project, right, I can kind of mess with it a little bit, try a few different things, see what works the best, kind of thing. So there is a little bit of that, and I think that takes some patience with yourself, because I also, while I do like to be creative, I like to try different things, I also tend to be pretty hard on myself when things don't go right. So it takes me learning myself the last few years, especially knowing that, hey, if I don't get that 100% right in the first go, that's not the end of the world, right? I have to give myself a little bit of, have to be a little patient with myself, and remember that I'm learning too. So yeah, I'd say that's the biggest thing is relying on community, but also kind of trusting that I can figure out and fix anything that, does come up in some way or another. So
can you think of a project that was a particularly difficult but satisfying challenge to overcome?
Yeah, so I had a really big job for a client that had a lot of work to give me if things went well, if that makes sense, and honestly was a job bigger than I normally would do. It was just a really huge house that had all kinds of work in it, and one of the last things I had to do there was he had a a fireplace that it was about, in total, it was like 22 feet from the floor to the top. It was pretty big, pretty wide, and I had built some custom shelves next to it. We put in a new fireplace, gas, all kinds of things, but then it needed to be faced with like a ledger stone. So, just kind of a fancy veneer stone. And I hadn't really done any work with that stuff before. So doing it 20 feet up in the air was a little different for me. So I had been kind of dreading it all year because I knew I was going to have to do it at some point. And I would say I definitely, first couple rows I took off, I did things wrong a couple times. But I would say, sticking with it and kind of figuring out what worked and what didn't, and stepping back. I loved the result. They loved the result. Everyone was happy. So it ended up working out really well. But it was something I was kind of dreading for months, honestly, just because it was, like I said, something I hadn't done before, but, kind of relying on that process that I had of both talking to other people, looking, getting information where I needed to, and, being a little patient with myself and not trying to force it too quick. So.
And I know, knowing a lot of the same people, I think one of the really interesting things about doing this kind of work is that, if you go like on YouTube and you look at something like I really like to watch like the stuff from This Old House because they're like really professional, and they'll like always show you best practices for everything. But then, when you talk to some of these guys, you find out that like, well, there's a couple other ways you can do it. And to me, seeing how like, oh, you can like that's a really interesting place to be creative. Like maybe a lot of times due to limitations, like maybe, if you're like, okay, well, this means I have to get a tool that I don't have, how can I figure out how to do it with what I do have? Or if I can't get a specific material, is there some other substitute or way, So taking that kind of, approach, let me put it this way. Realizing that like there's not necessarily like absolute rules. It's not necessarily about like, did you follow all the steps exactly? What matters is that you got it done, Does that mindset like affect the way you approach other areas of your life at all?
That's an interesting question, because I think yes and no. I hope it doesn't too much in some ways. Like I hope that I don't look at my relationships necessarily that way 100%. Like, if that makes sense. I think, to your point, yeah, I think, the person, we both know who I actually worked for a long time, but he was very good, very detailed, and I respected that about him a lot, and I still do. He's helped me with so many things, but I tend to find, I don't want to say that I'm cutting corners at all, because I believe, details are important. It needs to look really good. It needs to be done right 100%. But I do believe sometimes there's a middle ground between what people need and want and what makes the most sense. So I'm willing to kind of meet people in the middle there and be like, okay, we can do this for this. It'll look like this, if that makes sense. So I would say I would, yes and no, I guess. I would say I think it does probably bleed over into other areas of life, maybe, where I kind of try to find the most, what I would hope to think is efficient way, and not just the laziest way out of things. But yeah, I would say it probably does. In terms of specifics, I don't know that I'm sure, but yeah, it probably does, I guess, is the short answer to that.
Well, I just think like, because to me, like I always get way more excited. Like if somebody is just super meticulous and does an awesome job, like that's awesome. I guess I'm a little bit more interested in like understanding like how it works. So like I don't know if you ever seen like Japanese craftsmen. They like have a whole system where it's like, okay, if you're gonna make like I don't know. I mean, I guess even Japanese woodworking is kind of the way. Like, you're gonna have a guy who's gonna teach you how to do it. You're gonna do everything exactly the same way that he's teaching you to do it, and you're gonna do that process over and over again for every product. And it's amazing because you have the consistency. But then I'm a little bit more interested in like figuring out like, okay, well, I know how to do it that way. Like, how else could we do it? Like, what could we do different? Like, and sometimes it's funny with stuff like that, like, because you might need to cut a piece of wood or something like at an angle, and it might be a weird shaped piece, and it's like, how do you figure out like how do I get this like over to the saw and held in place to where I can make this cut? And like you could build a really complicated jig to like
Yeah.
hold it at the right angle, or you could use a handsaw.
Right.
And it's like and like 99 times out of 100, like a handsaw is going to be slower than using like a miter saw or a table saw. But for that one time, like
Right.
that's a pretty cool trick when you see somebody, and I think that's one of the cool things you get, like, if you're hanging out with guys like Papa Matson and these other old timers, is they'll, you must like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to measure this and do this.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, just do it this way.
Well, that's funny you say that, because not Papa Matson, but another, I guess not old timer. He does all the work with me. But he, I was doing something one day. I was doing crown molding, and I was setting, both angles, doing the right thing and everything. He goes, "Why are you doing that? Just hold it in the saw the way it's going to be up in the ceiling, and cut it out of 45." It changed my life, because I was like, wow, I've been avoiding crown molding for 3 years now, but I could have done it this whole time. I just didn't think to hold it like that and cut it, and we're good to go. But
yeah,
funny little things like that.
And that was something that was something when the company that I worked for now, that was like one of the only things that I was like, I don't have any really, I had done like on one project that I did for myself, kind of stumbled my way through it. But that way, cutting it nested like that. And then it's just, you always think, okay, upside down and backwards.
Yeah.
Have you ever had to explain that to somebody else?
Well, no, it's funny you say that, because I think one of my weaknesses is kind of explaining to other people. I mean, so I work by myself pretty much 90% of the time. I'll hire a guy or two here, or I hire out specific jobs sometimes, but it's mostly me. So, I haven't specifically, I don't think, had to explain that to anyone else. But part of the reason I don't have people is because I feel like I'm so bad at, naturally I'm pretty bad at explaining craft, like doing these types of things to other people. I know how it goes in my head, but it's hard for me to explain to other people. So, I haven't had to really work through that with anyone else yet. So that's been good, because I don't know if I could.
Well, I do have to tell you, so you were very instrumental in me developing some of my better teaching techniques, because you informed somebody that I was teaching a very boring Bible class.
Did I say that?
I don't know. You were in that class, and somebody said all the kids hate that class the most. They think that's the most boring class.
No, it's funny you say that, because I think I was probably one of the only ones who enjoyed it, because I did enjoy it. That was, I mean, I think some of my classmates maybe took issue, but I think that was a good class, because we were reading through, I can't remember the name of the book now, but it was a good book.
How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth.
Yes, yeah, and I still have it somewhere around here, but and it's funny, because you were I don't know if you just found it somewhere, if it was actually one of your strategies, but you kind of explained to me reading through the Bible in a year, and I think it's two Old Testament chapters, and then I believe it's a Psalm, and then a
New Testament,
something like that.
something like that. It'll get you it won't take too long. Well, because that's funny, because like when I was teaching that, and that was kind of my first, like I was very much like, oh, I'm a teacher now, like this is important and like this is official, and I have to do things the right way. And that was stuff that I had learned, like the hermeneutics stuff, and to me it's like, oh yeah, this is very interesting, like we can learn, like we know exactly what it means, and like we're being very precise in all this. But the thing that I didn't realize at the time is that like you kind of have to love the Bible first, and then you would care about the best way to study it. But if you're trying to teach somebody who doesn't know anything, like you're just giving them a formula, but there's no reason like why to care about it. So and that's something that I've learned, and so thank you for. I guess if you were the one that was having,
you can't take full credit, but
but that experience was, the other funny thing is, I feel bad for Phil Hamill, because I tried to teach Phil Hamill how to play the bass guitar, and I thought to do it like the most proper way, I need to like teach him how to read music
Mm-hmm.
while he's doing it. Ask me, Andrew, do I know how to read music?
Do you know how to read music?
No.
No.
No,
Right.
I don't. So that was a really dumb thing that I was trying to do, which wasn't how I learned. I learned by playing along to CDs basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then, kind of figured that out teaching his brother a little bit. I can't really take too much credit, but I said like, well, what music do you like? You like Led Zeppelin? Cool. Put your
Mm-hmm.
finger here, put your finger here. Now you're sort of playing a Led Zeppelin song. And he learned how to play real well because he loved doing it.
Yeah.
So if I had, but I don't think Phil ever tried to play
Yeah.
music anymore, so I ruined him. So unfortunately,
But you got it right with Peter. Peter still plays all the
yeah,
time. So
yeah. So that was the thing. So I mean, I guess you'd say, when hopefully in the future when you do have the opportunity, you'll take stock of that and just think about like, what makes this fun, and that was actually an interesting thing. So Pop, because I asked Papa, I'm like, what do you do with somebody that doesn't know anything? And he says, like with little kids, he's like, just give them a hammer and some nails and let them have fun, and they'll make a game out of it. And it's like, oh wow. And that's the thing. Like, I think you like obviously learning about God, learning about the Bible is serious stuff, but you kind of have to approach it from the place of it being fun first, or else you just you're never going to want to go deeper.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, so kind of back to those other guys. What was the role, or how important was it that you were able to have mentors teaching you some of this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it was huge. I mean, I won't lie, especially when early on, like I would say there was certainly an amount of pride that I had, right, going into it, thinking I knew everything about what I was doing, which looking back is funny because now I tell people all the time, I think to myself, wow, last year I didn't know what I was doing, but I say that every year. So it's kind of funny to me that, that's kind of just what keeps happening. But so I would say it was huge. I think Dave, who was my boss, he worked really well with me. He also was a Christian. Strong Christian, and so that worked out really well. So I got to see another Christian doing the trades and how how well that works. So it was huge, and he was a huge blessing because he taught me a lot about everything. It seemed like, right. So he was huge in just expanding my skill set, but also just kind of expanding my mentality because he's someone who I wouldn't say is very prideful and doesn't think he knows everything or anything like that. So it was very important and crucial for me to do that. And also the other thing that he did was he was very, good for me flexibility wise. He knew that, the ministries I was involved with were important, right? So he would never, he knew that, okay, so Wednesday night's youth group, he's got to go and get to that. So he wasn't going to keep me working. He was going to let me go. Right. So it was very important to have a mentor that understood, just the importance of that. Right. And so, and that was huge. And I think even further back, I was lucky enough to, like I said, have Papa Matson mentoring me. So he taught me, a lot of just very basic but beginning stuff, and kind of like what we were mentioning, kind of gave me the ability to kind of enjoy it and have fun, right? I kind of was able to learn that, okay, this is something that I can do, something I can enjoy and find success in. So yeah, I would say, it's huge. Both of them played very different roles, but very important roles, going forward. So yeah.
And you had some other mentors too? I know.
Yeah.
You were.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I know because you're played basketball in high school, and I know Coach Dan did a great job of mentoring people. And how did what did you kind of learn from him about?
Yeah. So outside of specifically the trades, and Dan actually does a little bit of trade work himself too, but I think the biggest thing he instilled in me, and I would say probably all my teammates would say the same. It's funny, we actually just had an alumni game last Friday, so I saw a lot of those guys, 15 years of people who played for him, and I think the biggest thing I took away absolutely was just I can always give more than I think I can, whether that's physically or whatever it looks like. I think that's the biggest thing, right? I think going in, I didn't think I could run as much as I could. I really didn't. And you start to learn that your limits are a lot further than you set for yourself. And I think Dan was a huge instrument in that, and still is. I still have a good relationship with Dan. I see him a lot. And just, his ability to help young men really see the, need and the satisfaction, I suppose, from kind of putting your all into something, right? And that looks like what that looked like in basketball. Obviously, I'm not playing professional basketball now. I was me and probably a lot of us weren't very close to that. But looking around that room with all those guys I saw, half of them are maybe not half, but probably a third or a fourth are running their own business. A lot of a big portion of them are very traditionally successful doing whatever they're doing, and a lot of them are still involved in ministry at some level. So it's encouraging to see that, especially from him. And I would say like I said, very much instilled the idea of hard work and giving everything, actually giving everything, not just saying you're giving everything, but pushing yourself further than you think you can. So
how has learning how to work with your hands affected the way that you think about your relationship with God, and I guess with the world that He created?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I know it's a weird thing, but my grandmother was this feels like not the beginning to the answer to that question, but my grandmother was a big part of my life, and I remember one of the verses she shared with me early on it's Malachi 3:3, which talks a lot about refiner's fire, and how the whole verse is refiner's fire, my heart's desire, and basically it kind of, the way I always was taught it was that it's about the process of refining, and essentially the story along with it was always that the refiner knows when the metal is done or the piece is done when they can see the reflection in it, right? So the idea that I'm going through this long process of being refined, and sometimes that's messy, and that doesn't always look clean, and on the individual, on the day by day, sometimes it doesn't look the best, and sometimes it looks bad, but it's a process, and we're getting out the impurities, and we're doing that, right? So I like to kind of think that's a lot like me in my spiritual walk, right? There's a lot of things that are getting hammered out and refined and taken out, and same thing I'm doing with materials, right? In a weird sense. So I'm, okay, this box of tile doesn't really look like much, right? But the way I can cut it, the way I can put it in there, the way I can do that, it can turn into something that looks really good, and I can be proud of and see, my own creativity as a reflection of it, if that makes any sense. But yeah, maybe that's a crazy answer, but
no, I mean, I think it's just interesting to me because I often will be just doing things, and while I'm doing it, to me, it'll be like, okay, I know when I'm approaching a problem, if I do it this way, it will work. If I try to do it this other way, it's not going to work. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's okay, this is just teaching me God made this world in a way that it makes sense. It's not perfect. There's a fallen aspect to creation, but we can fix things. Mm-hmm. And that to me is even the fact of just I'm repairing damaged cabinets and stuff, and it's like a symbol of just how God doesn't, because there would be an impulse to say it's broken, we have to throw it away and we get a new one. Yeah. But it's no, you don't have to throw things away. This is fixable. We can repair it. We can make it better, and that's the way God treats us. It's your past mistakes are part of that refining process. It's that's an investment, because not only you're here now, but you have that past, and that past actually makes you stronger because it's a testimony to what God can do, and it's something that you could use to help somebody else in some way, and so I just think about stuff like that all the time, and I think it keeps I don't know if you ever had an existential crisis or whatever. I think at moments I've kind of, you kind of wonder like what's the meaning of life
Yeah.
and all this stuff. And I think when you're working day to day with this tangible stuff and be like, okay, well, you know, like you could be worried like, oh, am I going to worry about like is life real, or are we just living in a simulation?
Yeah.
When it's like, okay, well, this wall here still needs to like do its job. It's not just like disappearing when
Yeah.
like stuff still has to work. It still has to make sense. And so it kind of keeps you from like going down those crazy rabbit
Right.
trails a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
So I think that's cool. So I just, I like hearing about all the different ways that that these things will make sense to different people, because God
Mhm.
created us all to be unique.
Yep.
So
Sure.
here's a similar question. Um, but have you ever contemplated or thought about the fact that like Jesus was a carpenter?
It's funny. I think I definitely have. And I think I'm probably more so. I don't know if I think of it as like a joke to myself, like a little bit like, oh yeah, Jesus was a carpenter too, kind of thing. But I do think there's maybe something to that. I don't know. I think especially when I'm doing, because I don't always do like carpentry type stuff, but I do it, somewhat regularly. So it does cross my mind a little bit just to kind of at least think about the fact that I'm sure the trade looked a little different, in those days, but it is an interesting fact that we happen to doing stuff with our hands obviously is something Jesus was okay with because that's what he did. So it obviously does hold the level of importance. But yeah, no, I would say it's crossed my mind a few times for sure.
Yeah, and it's real to say like it's usually carpenters the way that they wrote, but like tecton. So that's kind of where I got the
The name comes.
the name for the thing. But it basically just means like a worker or a craftsman or something. It could be like somebody that digs holes or whatever. So
Mhm.
I was even thinking like, okay, what kind of a hole would Jesus dig?
Mhm.
And like it's a weird thought because you think like maybe it's like, oh, it's gonna be like a perfectly
Yeah,
circular hole. And I'm like, no, I don't think so, because that would be like showing off. That
yeah,
wouldn't really be the purpose of the hole. It's like, is it gonna be like, I don't know. I think you would not be able to tell the hole that Jesus dug compared to anybody else's,
yeah.
but it would do everything that a hole needed to
Needs
do.
to do. Yeah,
And that's kind of a thing of like, well, okay, well, I could probably dig a hole that could do that
yeah.
too. So I mean that's kind of cool,
Right, right.
like um so yeah, it's good to think about stuff like that. So are you currently I know you're not training anybody to work alongside you right now, but are you currently doing ministry stuff still, or involved with
Yeah, so
things?
yeah, I am like I kind of briefly mentioned, I do youth group on Wednesday nights still. I've been doing that since I was out of high school, so we're unfortunately coming up on 10 years of that now. But and then past 5 or so years, I've been doing young adults as well. So I meet with a lot of young people every Sunday night, and those are the two biggest things that I'm doing right now. But yeah, so yes, I am.
Cool. Well, and I would definitely encourage you. So I'm going to be starting to get more involved with youth again at our church.
Mhm.
And I would encourage you to try to find ways to get kids, involved with what you're doing, because I think it'd probably be more interesting than you think they might
Yeah,
like, um, and it's definitely something that it's good to know.
yeah.
Like, what what would you say to somebody who's considering like a trade job, or,
Yeah.
or thinking
Yeah, I mean,
about doing
I
something?
would I would start by just saying, "Hey, give it a shot," if nothing else, right? Like either that means, "Hey, come hang out with me for a day," or go whatever your specific direction is you want to go. Give that a shot for a day and see. Hey, maybe you don't want to be an electrician, but maybe you want to be a plumber. Hey, maybe you don't want to be a carpenter, but you want to do whatever. So, the first thing I would say to you is give it a shot. And I would say, there's certainly nothing wrong with having that desire. I think I know a lot of people who, have a very fulfilling and Christ honoring life doing this kind of work. So I would say give it a shot. See if you hate it, then either go back to what you're doing or find something else out. But say jump in and just see how it feels.
And probably whatever you learn will be useful at some point in your life.
Yeah.
Even if it's not something you want to do full time, if you're going to own a home, it's really helpful to, have a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of ability, even just if you're aware, because, otherwise you're kind of at the mercy of anybody that's going to,
Right. Yeah. And I'm
whatever
sure, I don't
works.
know how much you've dealt with, directly with customers or stuff like that, but I know I've seen plenty of people that like they've gotten quotes and like this guy's ripping you off. Like I'm not trying to be a jerk here, but people who just don't really understand anything how any of it works, right? So I
Yeah.
mean, even though I'm not currently kind of training anyone up a little bit, I have had people, some students over the summer, when they're back from college, kind of give me a hand for a little bit, and I was like, hey, at the end of it, I said, I think probably it was 2 or 3 of them, and each one of them I would say, yeah, you probably would stick with what you're doing. I don't think this is maybe where you want to go, at least from what I can tell. But at least you have gotten your feet wet. You kind of know what goes on in some of this stuff. You know what it looks like to redo a bathroom. You know roughly what it probably should cost. So like, at least you kind of have an understanding of it, and you're not completely ignorant to the whole process, which is something for sure. So.
Can you think back, like what was like one of the first jobs where you really like felt like I can do this, like,
Mhm.
and
That's a good question. Because it started off pretty rough. My first job did not go right at all. So my first job that I really felt like I was like good to go, probably like a year after I had been in. Someone asked me to do their bathroom, and it was really the first time I had done a complete gut by myself and put everything back. But nothing major came up. I kind of handled anything that did really well, and everyone was pleased, and everything actually went right. So I think that was probably my first like, hey, you're not a complete loss. This is possible. Because up until that point, it had been a lot of treading water and a lot of like, it'll get better kind of thing. And like I said, luckily I had a community that kind of helped navigate that with me. But yeah, I think I had one bathroom for a nice young couple that, and it went really, really well, and they were pleased, and I was happy, and I felt like, all right, now we can make some momentum happen. So
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's a good feeling when you because I'm like, I'm always, even still, and I'm sure you're the same way. Even still, you're at any big project, you're like, okay, I'm planning everything. I'm like checking, make sure I have all the materials, extra stuff, try to plan out every contingency, anything that could go wrong, super meticulous as much as you can. And then and like if it starts off going well and it's just like, okay, great, well, it just keeps going well, and you just but you can't really relax until it's like all the way done,
yeah,
and then it's like, wow, that's a great feeling. So
yeah, for sure.
yeah, awesome. Well, I know you got some exciting life stuff coming
Yeah,
up. So
yeah. You want me to expound on that?
yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Oh, so I am getting married at the beginning of November of this year, so that's very, very exciting.
That's
I'm
awesome.
finishing up flipping the house that we're both going to live in, so that's actually what I've been working on the past couple days here. But yeah, so very excited. We're excited to start this next process, and she's very good at being a partner, especially in this type of stuff, right? I think it might scare off some people, the idea of kind of running your own business. It gets a little weird. Like, people have this notion that, you know, it's safer to have a fixed income or whatever you want to call it, kind of thing. But she's very good at trusting that our needs will be met and things like that. So it's a good fit.
That's awesome. And so you guys have a house that you're moving into, huh? So
Yes,
that's
yep.
pretty
So we got
cool.
that ready to go. I'm gonna finish, getting it ready to go, and hopefully it's works out well. So we're close. It's tough. I'm sure you probably know this too. It's sometimes when you're doing this kind of stuff all day, it doesn't seem like you want to come home and keep doing it. So or keep
Yeah.
working out later when you're done working. But it does.
Well, in my own house, like all the projects are okay, let's figure out like what I can get done in one day,
Yeah,
and then like the finishing touches will get done when my kids are older.
Yeah,
I guess
yeah.
so. Everything in my house is functional but not quite finished,
Well, not quite finished.
which
Yeah,
is
everything's 80%, which is kind of how I work because I don't always know. Maybe someone calls me and I need something right away, and I got to kind of
yeah.
jump on that. So, I kind of like rip the whole kitchen out, try and throw as much of it back together as I can, make sure everything's set up, and then okay, I can do the backsplash later. But whatever, backsplash will be 2 years from now probably. But it's just one of those things. So, but yeah, no, that's easy to do for sure. So, but
Okay, and so if people are interested in hiring you for work, it's Riel Renovations.
yes,
But how do you spell that?
it's Riel
Okay.
Renovations.
Okay.
It's plural.
And do you have a website or?
I don't have a website. I have an Instagram page, or realrenovations@gmail.com would also get you in contact with me. So either one of those would work.
Cool. So yeah, and I can put that in the little description so people
Yeah.
get a hold of it. And what areas of the country are you?
Yeah.
servicing?
So I'm in Massachusetts specifically. I do mostly southern Worcester County. So that's Worcester and south. I will go a little bit outside of that. I can go. I'm out of southern Worcester. So anywhere pretty much in this area, within an hour or so of that, I'm all yours. So,
Cool.
But yeah, I do pretty much like I tell people. I do not to make it a little marketing spiel here, but I do everything pretty much inside or outside of house for the most part. So I've done pretty much all of it, and there's not much that scares me anymore. So hopefully, unless we can find something, I'm sure there is, but
and a little bit of psychology too. If people
a little bit of psychology. Yeah, we can sit down and chat with your family if you want. I might be a little rusty. It's been 5 years since I've done any of that, but we can give it a shot. See what happens.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking with me. I appreciate it. And I think that I think people will be encouraged to hear your story, and hopefully it'll get people excited to consider trying something new. So
yeah, for sure.
All
right. Thank
you. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and check the links below in the description for other ways that you can get involved and help. Thank you.